Alrighty, guys, so because I was gone this past week, I didn't have a chance to cover episode 5 of Skeleton Crew, so this is going to be welcome. By the way, if you were just watching the segment, welcome to episode 5 and 6 of Skeleton Crew. Welcome to a full spoiler discussion of both episodes. I wanted to cover every single episode of all these shows because I feel like, once you do 1, 2, 3, 4, it feels kind of weird if you're looking at the playlist and you go, where's 5? So I wanted to, even though 5 is a couple weeks old, episode 5, I still wanted to talk about episode 5 on the podcast. So this is going to be a full spoiler discussion for episodes 5 and 6 of Skeleton Crew. I'm going to be I'll be going through episode 5 a little quicker, and then we'll talk more in depth about episode 6. So don't worry about that. We'll get to episode 6 pretty quickly on in this segment. And also, for those of you who can't tell, I have lost my voice a little bit. Travels have been pretty exhausting, but really fun. And so, really glad to have had that time and really, excited to be back on the YouTube grind. So anyways, episode 5 and 6, I've been stalling a little bit just to give you guys some time. If this is, if you are not interested in a spoiler discussion or if you just haven't seen the episodes yet, just make sure to save this video, save this segment, save the podcast for later, and come back once you have. Let's talk everything Skeleton Crew. Guys, I've loved the show. This show has been just such a breath of fresh air, and every single episode I am waiting for it to be a little bit worse until the finale just completely drops the ball. And yes, the finale can still drop the ball. But we're at this point now where the finale could still be very disappointing, and I'd still say overall this show is a success. And I think that's such a good and different place to be with these Star Wars shows. I've said this before. It's really the kids. The kids are what make this show what it is. Because if I'm not as invested in the kids, then yeah, some of these episodes are boring. Some of these episodes are cliche. Some of these episodes have really, cringy dialogue, but it's because I care about the characters. It's because of the emotional attachment I have to them and to their storylines that it makes it all worth it. There are some scenes in this episode where, we have KB in episode 6, where we have KB and Wim talking, where if it was just two characters I didn't care about it, even if they were just two adult characters, because I think part of the joy of having a show built around kids, and particularly kids that you enjoy watching, not the, kind of stilted wooden child actors. And no offense to them at all, because it's, again, I've said this before, they're children. Like, what can we expect from children to act on the same level as adults? No. And the fact that some of them can is incredible. So, no. But, I just to say that most child actors are not as good of actors. And so to have actors here that are just so good at what they're doing, at conveying emotion and portraying themselves as characters that are lovable and you root for them is great. It's awesome. So I've been loving the show. I watched episode 5, and we'll go through again. Like I said, we'll go through quickly my notes here on episode 5. I was watching it out of home at least, and I still loved episode 5, and so we'll get into episode 6 just a little bit. But let's start out here quickly with episode 5. I'm not gonna go through a huge breakdown of the episode because again we want to get through episode 6, which is the most important part. So just to start out here, we have now the parents who are I think they're starting to hint at the fact that the parents are getting more involved here, right? Which is really interesting. They get caught here, but there's this question. They get caught by the droids, but then they get rescued. And I think the question here is really, who's the supervisor? And I think we have a pretty good idea. Not to bury the lead here, I think Renid, is that the name, Captain Renid? I have a suspicion that he basically took that ship, crash landed at Aden, and decided, you know what, I this is a life for me. I get to print money for myself and make other people print money for me, and I'm the supervisor now. I have a feeling that is exactly what's going to happen. If it happens, I won't be disappointed by it. I think the show is setting it up pretty well. It's kind of the obvious answer, right? And if it doesn't happen, I'd just be curious to see how the show resolves itself. So, there's that. Anyways, they get to this spa planet, and what do you know? Another name for Jod. It's what else is new? Also, before that, there's a really interesting scene here where Jod and Wim are talking, and Jod is attempting to comfort Wim, but then he gives some really bad advice, which is maybe hinting towards the betrayal that happens later on in the episode. So, I think we're getting some hints there towards the beginning. I think this planet, right? So, because I've said this before, I love The Last Jedi, right? I think The Last Jedi is one of my favorite films that they've done since Star Wars has bought Lucasfilm, or excuse me, since Disney has bought Lucasfilm. But I will say that this Canto Bight planet, right, the Canto Bight subplot and all that kind of stuff, really was not the part of the episode that worked for me at all. I think that part, if you take that out, it's really, The Last Jedi to me is one of the better Star Wars films. Again, I know controversial, but it's all just our opinions, and totally respect everything that you guys have to say about episode 8. But that being said, I was a little bit worried that this spa planet, Lanupa, right, it's called, was going to be similar. It's going to be like, oh boy, it's going to be way too over the top and way too kind of Vegas-y. And somehow it just works. I know, again, it's silly. It's and this kind of stuff, where the kids are wearing those cloaks and Jod is calling them the wise elders. It doesn't work in a show like Obi-Wan. It doesn't work in a show like Mando, but it just works here. And I love that about this show. I just love that. Also, I love Smee. I'm going to call him Smee now because it's SM33. I love how mad Smee is just to be restrained with that droid thing. I think that's so funny. And yeah, we get to see a hut here, which is, I don't know, that's interesting. Hinting at, was it Rada, the hut? Going to be in Mandalorian and Grogu? What a crazy thing. And yeah, it's just like from here, there's kind of some hijinks, and it's hard to explain, honestly, why this show works in this way and others don't, and just the sort of cheesiness and goofiness, but it works. It really does. And basically the kids are able to find this sort of Indiana Jones style booby-trapped layer of Renid, and Jod, supposedly pours acid on all of them, although we find out in this episode that I guess they didn't die, so I don't know what happened there. Maybe they just ran out in time. And yeah, this is where at the end of this episode I was like, yeah, no, Renid is totally the supervisor, and he's printing the money. And then Jod, challenges Fern to single combat, which is crazy. I was pretty stunned by that, and there is still some remorse, or not remorse, but still some restraint in him is what I meant to say, because he doesn't immediately kill a child, kill Fern. I mean, that would be crazy if he did that, and he would really turn into a villain at that point. As of right now, I still think he's just a greedy pirate, but I'm sure at the end of this season he'll kind of make that turn and be like, yeah, I realize the errors of my ways and all that kind of stuff. And it ends with the kids flying down that tunnel and a lightsaber, which, moving ahead to episode 6 now, the lightsaber is nowhere to be seen. So I'm wondering if the pirates took it and we just didn't really get wind of it in this episode. I wonder if that's the case here. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I was wondering the whole episode. I was like, okay, you end episode 5 with the lightsaber. So episode 6, it's nowhere to be seen. And that's kind of curious. So anyways, let's get into episode 6 here. We start out here, and the kids are diving through these tunnels, and they end out, it's very Death Star-esque in episode 4 of Star Wars, and they end up in this trash heap, basically, except it's outdoors. And then KB is down for the count, and I think, her arc in this episode is very interesting. The fact that she shuts down and is really hesitant to show weakness around Fern, which I think is an interesting move for these two characters, right? Showing I think what one character views as an insecurity for herself, and also maybe another character flaw for Fern as well. So I think that's interesting. And then Jod, meanwhile, breaks out of the lair, and he's wearing all of the clothes, or all the treasure around him. But the pirates, which I was surprised, I thought they all got swallowed up by acid, but the pirates are there, and they're ready to take him captive, which is interesting. And then X-Wing show up. So it's a lot of stuff going on in the background. But in the foreground here, we still have the 4 kids. And, KB gets really mad at Fern to start out the episode. And I kind of thought, is something up with KB? Did she get possessed somehow or something? Because I thought it was just really weird and out of character for someone like KB to lash out at Fern like that. Turns out, she was on the verge of shutting down, which is fair. I still think it was a little bit abrupt how that happened at the beginning of the episode, because I was like, this is such an abrupt turn for a character like KB. But I think at the end of the day, once you realize what's going on, it kind of makes sense, right? So I think that is all good there. And we see these little hermit crab droid things, or hermit crab creatures with robotic parts, and basically the crew splits up, which I immediately was like, bad idea. Maybe 2 of them are going to get captured for the finale, but it turns out it's just sort of I think a chance for the writers to get Wim and KB in the same room together, so they can talk about, I say room, they're outside, but the same space together, so they can talk about their feelings, which I think is fine. I think that's totally fine. Meanwhile, we have Jod back on the ship, and he's really trying to talk his way out of it, which works, because it's going to work. I don't know if I'm super convinced by the fact that he was able to convince all these pirates who hate his guts that, to let him live for a little while longer. But I guess it's fair that he's like, no, there's treasure at Aden, and I'll let you in on it, if you let me live. But also on the flip side, it's like, how many more times are you guys gonna let Jod, fool you? Because this feels like one too many. But maybe this is the last straw. Maybe this really is the last straw. And then we get the scenes with Wim and KB. And KB is really shutting down. And it feels a little random, honestly, in the grand scheme of this entire show, but it does add some tension, I will say. And it actually is kind of sad. I was surprised how much it hit me. I'm not gonna say I started crying or anything. Nothing like Shrinking or Ted Lasso or Inside Out or anything like that. But I felt really really bad for this kid. And the fact that she starts revealing more of her backstory, and it actually is really sad. She had an accident apparently, which I wasn't aware of. I just thought, oh, she just has cybernetic parts or whatever, and that's totally fine. But she had an accident apparently, and that really caused some insecurities and it's caused some doubts for her with her relationship with Fern. And I think that's really sad. And when she does shut down, I mean, they're not going to just kill this kid, right? That it would be crazy for a Star Wars show to do. But when she does shut down, I felt that, and I think that's such a great job again for the characters, right? To the characters and the world, that you're able to care about these kids, on that level. And eventually, Wim is able to fix her, and they go on their way. It is funny though how they end up back with that crab thing, or they end up going to that crab creature, and Wim is like, how am I always wrong about who the good guy is? And I'm like, yeah, Wim, how are you always wrong with who the good guy is? Because that's kind of funny. And then the four of them, so then Fern and Neil are climbing this huge wall, and they basically go through these hijinks to get back to the ship, and they all reconcile, and they all hug and make up, and it's all good, it's all better again, and I love that. I love how the kids are finally working together and finally becoming more of a team. Obviously, this is where the show is going to go, because it's a classic trope, right? At first hesitant allies, and then slowly starting to get to know each other, and then having some falling outs, and then coming back to it's classic. It's a classic trope, but I think it just it feels so satisfying when it happens to characters you actually care about and actually love, and it makes the whole ship escape part of the ending here really fun, because you're like, yeah, let's get this ship going, really rooting for these kids to get going here. And surprisingly, that's the end of the episode. So normally these episodes are pretty good about having little cliffhangers or having little things that hint towards the next episode. This episode doesn't really do that. On the one hand, because explicitly it doesn't have that. Like, it doesn't have the shot of the lightsaber or anything like that. On the other hand, though, implicitly, I think it's pretty clear where the show is heading for the final two episodes. It's a race to adaptaion, basically, where the kids are going to head home. They have the coordinates in KB's head, I think, and Jod seems to have the coordinates, or at least Smee has the coordinates, and he's heading for, or they got it from Rened's cave or whatever. And so he has the coordinates, so the pirates are going there, and it's all going to converge on adaptaion. I have no doubt that Rened is going to appear at the very end, and maybe the next episode, where he's going to confront all of them, and they're going to find out what's going on with the Old Republic Mint, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's exciting. I think that this show, unlike other Star Wars shows, feels properly paced. And I'm like, yeah, let's start heading towards the finale. I'm going to be really sad when the show ends. I hope there's a season 2. I really hope there's a season 2, because I love these kids. I love the show. But, just it feels like, yeah, we should be heading towards the conclusion of all of this. And the last thing I'll say is, I said this in my immediate reaction, is that when the episode ended, because the episode was, by the way, so quick, 28 minutes, crazy. I really wish just 5-10 minutes longer. Anyways, how hard could that be? I know it's millions of dollars for Disney. You have millions. Anyways, I don't want to go off on that. But 28 minutes was really short. But by the time the credits rolled, it said Bryce Dallas Howard directed this episode. And I was like, oh, yeah, totally makes sense, because I believe from my memory that the Bryce Dallas Howard episodes of Star Wars have always been the ones that really bring that kind of excitement and joy to them. That they have a very joyful bounce to them, I think, which is an interesting, I don't know, maybe that's a weird way to describe it, but they have this kind of feel to them where it seems like she totally gets Star Wars while also being, putting her own stamp on it, having the kids, really talk about their emotions and having really great action as well. And she just captures all the different parts of Star Wars that you really like. And I said, her episodes in Star Wars are never my favorites, but I think every time I watch them and every time the credits roll and it says Bryce Dallas Howard, I'm like, oh yeah, always solid job, really, really solid job. And I could totally tell afterwards. I was like, yeah, that totally makes sense. She did a really solid job again on this episode. So guys, that was those are my thoughts on episodes 5 and 6 of Skeleton Crew. I know we did a double spoiler discussion here. These episodes are kind of short though, so I feel like it's okay. We did one for Creature Commandos as well. Again, those episodes are even shorter, so hopefully that was okay. But we're gearing up for the finale. I don't know. I think it's just episode 7 next week and episode 8 the week after. So we'll have a couple more weeks of Skeleton Crew, and then we'll do a full, just like we did with Dune Prophecy. We're doing with Dune Prophecy. We'll do a wrap up episode where we'll talk about the finale and the whole series, and that'll be that, guys. For hopefully, I'm hoping to say, one of the best Star Wars series ever made. and I'm really excited to see where the show ends up at the in the conclusion. But guys, let me know in the comments, what did you think of episode 6 of Skeleton Crew and episode 5 as well, if you if you care to comment about that. Let me know in the comments if you're enjoying the show, and let me know what you're thinking.